and remind you that this month's theme is the art of. And today's topic is the art of happiness. And believe it or not, there is actually a book titled exactly that. Would you like to know the name of the author? I just happen to have it because I have a copy of the book, which was published in 1998, just as I was finishing up my ministerial training. It sounded like a really good title to have in my library. So, and the tagline on it is A Handbook for Living. So the name of the author is Lamau Donyok. At least that's his birth name. And he was born in July of 1935. His religious name is Tenzin Gyatso, which is shortened from his complete name. That is 7 words, and I would insult him for sure if I tried to pronounce all 7 names. So if you have an idea who this is, just raise your hand and leave it up for a minute so I can see it. Or just send me a quick, short chat. Who do you think this is? I'll wait for a few seconds and see what comes in on chat as I share with you. First, you undoubtedly have determined it's a man. And second, that he is still here on planet Earth in his 84th year. And third, he apparently has some kind of connection with a religious teaching. Good guess, Helen, you're close. Helen just sent me a text, Thich Nhat Hanh. Oh, bingo. You're on to me now. But here is one more hint for those of you who are still contemplating this. And this is a quote from this man's lips. In Buddhism, there is the idea of dispositions and imprints left by certain types of experiences, which, he says, is somewhat similar to the idea of the subconscious or the unconscious in Western philosophy. For instance, he continues, a certain type of event may have occurred in an earlier period of your life, which has left a very strong imprint in your mind and which can remain hidden and then later affect your behavior. Now that's got to be a slam dunk. It's a Buddhist man who has studied Western culture, religion, and spiritual teachings. And he believes in the art of happiness as a way of living. Helen got it on the second guess. It is indeed the Dalai Lama. So way to go. Now, raise your hand. Anybody else that thought it was that, but you weren't sure? Now you can be sure. I'm going to talk today about the beliefs and the expressions and the teachings of the Dalai Lama 14. To me, the story of the Dalai Lama begins with how he represents himself with the sweetest, loving smile on the planet. I believe his smile represents his belief that the very purpose of each person's life is to seek and to express happiness. He qualifies that by saying that whether one believes in religion or not, or believes in one religion or another, we are all seeking something better in life. And that is that the very motion of our life is toward happiness. Furthermore, he believes that happiness can be achieved by training the mind. When he uses that phrase, training the mind. He references the term in the sense of the Tibetan word sem, S-E-M, sem, which includes intellect and feeling, heart and mind. By bringing about inner discipline, we can undergo a transformation of our attitude, our entire outlook, and approach to living. This inner discipline that he speaks of means beginning by identifying those factors which lead to happiness and those factors which lead to suffering. Having done this, he advises, then one sets about gradually eliminating those factors which lead to suffering and cultivating those which lead to happiness. And with that loving smile, the Dalai Lama says, and that's the way. So while we are here in this plane of existence, for however long that may be, savor each taste that life has to offer you. Consider what is the purpose of your life and what makes your own life meaningful. The Dalai Lama strongly believes that the purpose of our lives includes seeking and living in consciousness. It just seems like common sense, he says. And thinkers from Aristotle up to current thinkers like William James, and more current like Viktor Frankl, and most recently Sonia Labonursky in her 2010 book, The How of Consciousness. Happy people are found to be more sociable, more flexible, more creative, and better able to tolerate life's daily frustrations. Happy people exhibit the quality of openness, a willingness to reach out to others, and to help others. Most importantly, they are found to be more loving and more forgiving. Well, more than what, you might ask? His answer? More of all these things than people who aren't happy. Sometimes he speaks to our hearts from the standpoint of he's so Americanized with his phrases, and they touch us that he's taken the time to learn those, to understand those, and to share those with us. The Dalai Lama believes that humankind has the right to happiness. It's a vision of happiness as a real objective, one that we can take positive steps toward achieving. And as we identify the factors that lead to a happier life, we learn that this benefits not only ourselves, but our families and others around us. So let's identify the factors that lead to a happier life, what the Dalai Lama calls sources of happiness. We're all familiar with the physical things that could be considered factors, for example, lots of money and other material things. But eventually, we discover that the essential point is that happiness is determined more by one's sense of mind or state of mind than by external events. External events may result in temporary feelings of elation, but sooner or later our overall level of happiness tends to migrate back to a certain baseline. Isn't that an interesting word? A baseline. Word to think about. And this tendency is not limited to trivial everyday events, but persists even more under extreme conditions, or triumphs, or disasters. But if we have developed a high level of happiness or well-being as our baseline, what I would call our sacred self, that resurfaces and reestablishes our balance of being, which is another way of saying the sacred self, having a human experience, has the capacity and the ability to acknowledge the emotions of being human and to return to center, as I talked about earlier in this series, in the art of. And that is to return to the center of our being, which we know is our source of happiness. The Dalai Lama says further, although it's possible to achieve happiness, happiness is not a simple thing. There are many levels. In Buddhism, for example, there is a reference to the 4 factors of fulfillment or happiness. 1, wealth. 2, worldly satisfaction. 3, spiritually. And 4, enlightening. Sounds like a staircase, doesn't it? It's because it is. The first 2 of those, wealth and worldly satisfaction, are something we can use in positive ways and in helping others, contribute to supporting ourselves and the world in achieving a happier life. The 3rd step, spirituality, and the 4th step, enlightenment, speak to calmness of mind, peace of mind, internal stability, internal contentment, and worth. Spiritual worth. I could do a whole month series of talks on this one point alone, sources of happiness. I may do that. However, today I'm going to move on and in the time remaining talk with you about the Dalai Lama's words on training the mind for happiness. We have a mind, which is all the basic equipment we need to achieve complete happiness. When we refer to mind or consciousness, he says, there are many varieties. There are thousands of thoughts. Some are very helpful. Some we should take and nourish. And some are negative. Those we can reduce and let go of. So the first step in seeking happiness is learning. And by learning, he instructs us that the negative thoughts, emotions, and behaviors are harmful to us, and positive ones are helpful. It kind of sounds like, duh. I knew that, doesn't it? Sounds like science of mind, doesn't it? But what he reminds us is that our negative thoughts are not only harmful to us individually, but go out into that collective consciousness and are harmful to society and to the future of the world. The message here, believe it or not, is a positive one. That kind of realization enhances our determination to face and to overcome the negative and instead replace them with our realization of the beneficial aspects of the positive ones. That is what he calls spontaneous willingness from within. And that spontaneous willingness from within develops within us the realization that the secret to my own happiness, my own good fortune, is in my own hands. I must not miss this opportunity. His second step in seeking happiness is mental discipline. And he addresses that like this. Achieving actual and genuine happiness may require bringing about a transformation of outlook and thinking for some people. This requires recognizing that there is more than one key or secret. There's a variety of approaches and methods to do so. The message? Find what works for you and do so. And remember, change takes time. It's a process. Here's one exercise that he suggests, which may sound vaguely familiar to you. As soon as I wake up, I tell myself, I do not waste this day. I utilize this day in a more positive way. With methods like this, he says, we can strengthen the positive aspects of the mind. For us, in the science of mind, we would refer to that as an affirmation, wouldn't we? Same old, same old. Truth is truth, in whatever language. His next words on the positive training of the mind are these. After I learn about the positive values of my spiritual practice, I build determination to implement them. No matter what activity or practice I am pursuing, he says, anything is made easier through constant familiarity and training. Through training, I can change. I can build determination. I can transform myself. A third step the Dalai Lama outlines in training the mind for happiness is what he calls ethical discipline. He believes that the ethical behavior is another feature of the kind of inner discipline that leads to a happier existence. Great spiritual teachers like the Buddha advise us to perform wholesome actions which arise from a disciplined mind. In fact, the Dalai Lama shares with us that discipline within one's mind is the essence of the Buddhist teaching. And you know, I was a little surprised by that, so I went online and I did some research. And I'm still finding readings that take me back to those teachings that have expanded in so many ways by so many Buddhist teachers down through the years and walking the planet today. And with that sweet, loving smile, the Dalai Lama further instructs us that when I speak of discipline, I'm referring to self-discipline rather than discipline that is externally imposed on me by somebody else. In other words, my words, we are cause to our own effect. And it's also not our job to discipline somebody else. That's their job. Well, you know, I'm always studying the words and actions of such highly regarded spiritual leaders as the Dalai Lama, so inspiring and so useful. His life experiences, as many of you know, are unlike anybody else I can think of. And yet his outlook on life, his way of living, and sharing his life are of such high character and useful for others. And though the wording may be somewhat different from the words we use in Science of Mind, the messages, the guidance, and the positive effect of his ministry, I call it that, ministry. I'm not sure that's the actual word, but it's one that we relate to. The guidance and positive effect of his messages resonate so clearly with our beliefs that I am reminded once more of the searching and the researching that Ernest Holmes did as he brought together the expression of the philosophy we call the Science of Mind. How blessed we are to have multiple resources to guide us in the art of uncertainty, the art of being, the art of thinking, today the art of happiness. And stay tuned for next week, the art of the artist's way. And so it is.